Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. Now, we are joined by Refracted Curvature, Neil, Brian's Logic, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Hey, good morning, Nathan.
Hi. Good morning.
Morning. Is that it? 2 mornings? Well, morning. Good to have you all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So we were
Couldn't reach the mute button, but good morning to all.
Jolly good. Nice to see the enthusiasm level at +1. Very good. So just before we got into the live show, we were discussing whether or not there's actually any problem, shall we call it, because that's how it was phrased by one deck, for the overriding grip, if you will, of the heliocentric model in the Western world. And towards the end of the Uncut and After show, subscribe today to my second channel to get that show for free in a couple of days' time, or just after the weekend. And or become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member if you want to watch it right away, or once it's been finished recording. But John's point towards the end, I hope you'll tail off from the end of this, John, was to say that in the last, let's call it a year, there's been a couple of changes in the argument in terms of the relinquishment of a tangent plane, something we can very easily reference, and I did check out my Mr. Sensible video in terms of his reiteration that they don't have any straight lines and tangent points to them. That's an easy reference given that it's been 2 years come to pass with them telling us that they don't have any straight lines. It's all refracted always, and the line along the ground is bent and won't give you an elevation angle. So that's the first one. The second one is that we've made a positive assertion. Celestial navigation proves the Earth is flat. Now, to date, while we've had examples and good arguments and good logical consistency, it hasn't been necessarily as over a positive assertion as the elevation angle has us giving now. So, John, I don't know if you can hopefully follow off the back of that to keep this conversation going, because I was fascinated in what the state of play really is. I'm always quite fascinated in, because I don't know.
Hello.
Hey, Arwen. As John lost signal right at the point I've queued him up. Clearly. Did anybody else in Discord have any comments on it? On what we were discussing before we went live? If not, we'll get into housekeeping.
I came in at the end of it, so I don't know.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Let's just do housekeeping then, because obviously that fascinating conversation isn't going to enlighten anybody any further than it has with my introduction that's gone to the wayside. Let's just try one more time. You there, John? Clearly not. Let's do housekeeping. Any evidence that you can acquire an elevation angle from a curved baseline? Hey, Sleeping Warrior.
Hey. Just ask that question again, Nathan.
Any evidence you can acquire an elevation angle from a curved baseline?
So, I've got something to share. This is why I've joined. Do you want to present my screen, please?
Sure.
This one. That one. And then let's make that into this. You see my screen, yeah?
I do.
All right, so any evidence that you can have a curved adjacent next. What was your question?
Any evidence that you can acquire an elevation angle measurement from a curved baseline?
Right, so this is what I'm going to explore now, right? So obviously their geometry is Einsteinian, right? Because Earth's mass curves space-time. And because it curves space-time, it means that they haven't got any straight lines. Now, what they want to do is they want to use this kind of geometry to claim that they can measure angles. The problem is, like Nathan says, the curved adjacent, if they've worked out that they can't use the horizon as their datum point. So the straight line to the horizon that they call tangential, they call it the tangential plane, or whatever phrase that they want to use. They've worked out that they can't use that. So what they're doing is they're using the elevation angle from vertical now. So in the top of the lines here, I've got the line showing the horizontal. They've worked out they can't do that. So now they're working based on the vertical. They're using what they call astronomical or celestial navigation or celestial astronomy or whatever they call this phrase. Think about the lines that they're applying. So they get the vertical because that's the only line that they've got that's straight, which is the vertical. But then no matter what they do, whether they call it a tangential line or an angle of elevation or whatever angle, and it doesn't matter whether they put it there or whether they put it here, the moment they put a line, that creates an angle that they claim, therefore makes their model work. The problem is because of Earth's mass, that's really what they need. Because Earth bends the geometry, they can't use Euclidean geometry. They can't use Cartesian coordinates to do anything with angles. So it curves the straight line. So the curved adjacent is caused by Earth's mass. And they've got to apply this because this is what Einstein says is the current model. And this is how they say Earth's mass curves space-time. So no matter what they do, the moment they try calling something a tangent, well, it's not a tangent, is it? Because it's curving because of Earth's mass. They don't have any straight lines. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to apply Euclidean geometry in a non-Euclidean space-time with non-Euclidean coordinates, and they're completely incompatible. You can't do it. So when you see them doing these kind of things here, they're calling all these, and no matter how they word it, no matter how they label it, no matter what they call it, the minute they start putting straight lines and using angles, you've got to correct them and say, actually, it's curved space-time, your geometry, isn't it? It's non-Euclidean geometry that you're using because that's what your model says according to Einstein. So don't let them put any straight lines anywhere. Okay, give them the vertical, that's a straight line in their model. But they don't have any straight lines to apply any angles to in the first place because Earth's mass bends space-time. So the moment you see them calling things like tangent lines or tangent planes or anything to do with horizontal or level or anything like that, and where they put a straight line, correct them and say, you're using the wrong geometry there. You're using, quote, flat Earth geometry, because only in flat Earth geometry do we get straight lines. That flat Earth geometry is Euclidean geometry, where straight lines, angles, horizontals, they're all terms that we can use day to day because we do use them. And then they'll make sure that they can't use them because that's our geometry that we use because we do use straight lines, we do use angles, we do use trigonometry to calculate distances, but they will not accept it. So make sure that they get their geometry used, which is non-Euclidean, which is not Cartesian, it's non-Euclidean coordinates, not Cartesian coordinates, and tell them that they can't get any angles. So to answer Nathan's question, how do you get an angle from a curved adjacent? You can't. Why? Because it doesn't work with their geometry of their model. Their geometry is non-Euclidean, no straight lines. That means no angles. It means no horizontals, no tangentials. Nothing works on their geometry because their geometry's got curves everywhere. So they can't get any angles, any curves. Everything's upside down and mashed up for them. It doesn't work. But that's not our problem. They need to use our geometry and they need to use straight lines to get angles and then make claims based on that. But that's flat Earth geometry. That's Euclidean geometry. Welcome to flat Earth.
Can you go back one slide? Good job, by the way, Anthony. It's another angle. Obviously, up until now, we've focused on the geometric aspect of the Earth curve tangent point. You're now focusing on the pseudo-Riemannian for space-time bending, which causes the same exact problem. They don't have any straight lines to acquire an angle. However, when they try to deceive you by using this Euclidean process with a automatic inference that non-Euclidean is applicable to a sphere Earth in bending space-time. Nevertheless, they're going to try and attempt it, which is what Anthony's point is, and this straight line along the top is what they're going to be measuring their angle to. Well, this straight line is the baseline, and it's going to be in reference to the star's position. In other words, if the star was here, that's where you're measuring the angle to, that's where you're going to plot its position, 90 degrees to your position. So you've got this star along this baseline. Again, we're back to Dingleberry Earth, no reference whatsoever to the actual angle measurement that's going to be taking place on a flat plane. And all they're trying to do at the moment is justify how they can acquire and have and use this flat plane and maintain a sphere belief. The way they've done it is by saying tangent. Anthony's debunked their tangent by way of pseudo-Riemannian force space-time bending. We debunked it in 2020 with the black swan. They don't have any straight lines, it's all refracted. Further to that, the baseline itself is all curved. It fails on every single part as soon as you go to celestial navigation. Now let's show how it's actually done. So this is a diagram that is akin to, go back one frame, Anthony. This line along the top with an angle being measured. This is you with a sextant measuring an angle along a flat baseline. Must be done in both models this way. They just say, oh, we get that straight line 90 degrees to our zenith position, even though you don't have a zenith mirror in a sextant, but I digress. This is how it's actually done. That line is in reference to this triangle and this baseline to the GP of the star along a flat plane, so you can measure the angles. It's the only way it can be done. Celestial navigation proves the Earth is flat. You cannot, in answer to the housekeeping question, acquire an elevation angle from a curved baseline.
Let me just extend on that, because like you've given one example where they measure an angle, or they claim that they're measuring an angle using the wrong geometry. The alternative that they do is they use the vertical, because I was listening to Bev Try Thinking and his discussion with somebody the other day, and he wasn't measuring it based on the horizontal. I think they've realized that the horizontal they can't use because it's a curved line. It's subject to 7/6R plus curvilinear geometry, non-Euclidean geometry. So it seems that they're not using the horizontal anymore. So be wary. If they use the vertical and they measure the angle using time, then what they're doing is they've got the datum point is the vertical. They then measure this line here and claim the angle from the blue line as their angle for celestial navigation or whatever they want to use it for. But if they do that, this line that they're measuring to the star or whatever it is they're looking at, they're saying that that's a straight line, and it's not. It's this curved line. It's subject to refraction, and they say, "Well, we can adjust for that." Yeah, but what you might be able to adjust for refraction, but you're not adjusting for the effect of the curvature of space-time caused by Earth's mass, which is what their geometry is. So they always what they want to do is they want to use a straight line, correct for refraction. But what they need to do is a straight line, correct for refraction, but also the curvature of space-time, because obviously we're on the surface of Earth, and that's showing how the curvature of space-time warps their straight lines, because none of these horizontal lines here, none of them are straight. They're all curved as they get towards the surface of Earth. So they don't have any, so they need to adjust for not only refraction, the curvature of space-time caused by Earth's mass. So if they're going to take it from the vertical, okay, they can adjust for refraction. How do they adjust for the curvature of space-time caused by Earth's mass? And there is no adjustment for it. Why? Because it doesn't do it. Einstein's model is conceptual, but it is their geometry, and they must use it because they don't have any straight lines. Nathan?
Where on the sextant is the zenith mirror, if you're saying they start from the horizontal? Second question, why would you ignore the horizontal when you're referencing those measurements to the ground by minusing it from 90 degrees to get it to the ground level?
Well, they don't have a zenith mirror because they just take a reference or a datum from a swinging plumb bob or a dangling plumb bob. So they get vertical from that, and then they measure from that.
Sorry, I missed my question. On a sextant?
Well, I was dealing with your first question. You said your first question was, where's the zenith mirror? There isn't one. They claim that they use vertical from the plumb bob. Your second question, ask your second question again.
They're saying that it's only in reference to the angle that you take from your zenith up to the star. But the process involves minusing that from 90 degrees to get it to give you your line along the ground. You're getting a distance measurement from that angle. The whole purpose is to take that angle and translate it into a distance along the ground when you minus it from 90. If you're doing it with that angle in the sky. Perfectly reasonable, so long as you minus it from 90 to get it onto the ground. And again, that's the parallel line that runs with this line, the one that they try and justify by saying, oh, well, it's a massive, infinitely expanding tangent plane. It has to be this line that it's being referenced to. So if the star's here, it's 90 degrees to the star, not along the sphere Earth. Not using curvilinear geometry, also to speak to your point. But my point is, if you're saying they measured the angle in the air, for what purpose? We're not measuring to get angles to stars, we're measuring to get the GP on the ground.
That's right. All I'm saying is that I've heard them explain it both ways now. I've heard them referring it to the vertical as the datum point rather than the horizontal, and I've heard them referring to the horizontal as the datum point and calling that a tangential plane or a tangential line or whatever word they want to use to describe it. But
Describe it being a plane, Anthony. When they say a tangential plane, the tangential plane, is a flat baseline, flat Earth that will correspond to the measurements they make, won't it? Just tangent to a sphere.
But in their geometry, it's not a flat. Look, this is that next slide. In their geometry, that flat line that they're saying is a tangential plane or whatever word, it isn't a tangential plane because a tangent is a straight line touching a circle, not a curved line in non-Euclidean geometry. That's the point I'm making.
And the line of sight that they might want to utilise if they say, oh, when we look through a sextant, we just have a straight line to the horizon we're measuring. They don't have that either. Black swan. All lines are refracted at a standard rate of r. So they're screwed from every single angle. This is an extra one, which I really appreciate, Anthony. Thank you very much.
Can I
You're
say
right.
something on it?
Yeah, one sec. So when they line up to the star, so I'll use it in their models to show you how stupid it is. When they line up to this star here or one of these stars over here somewhere, that, like Nathan says, that is a curved line because of the curved geometry that they must use. Well, that's not our argument. That's their geometry. But they want to steal our geometry, call it flat Earth geometry, but it's actually the geometry of measuring angles. So they can't measure any angles using their nonsense geometry. But that's unfortunately why they don't like Einstein, because they can't measure angles with it. But guess what, guys? He is your alma mater. He is your key person. He is the current position in science. Guess what? You can't measure jack with it. Go on, Brian.
Yeah, this comes from them not understanding something. What they're tending to do by taking this angle off the vertical, right, is it's just begging the question, but it means they don't understand. The horizon mirror goes to your horizon, and then, besides any other nonsense, but well, I'm not talking about index corrections or anything else. I'm talking about their mathematical dip correction, any of this rubbish. The only real life correction that happens after that is the height of eye correction, which brings the vertex from the eye line down to the water underneath the boat. Right, that gives you your 90. It gives you an angle coming from a 90. It's a Pythagorean right angle. It's along the surface of Earth. What they're trying to do is just send a line up off of the zenith, right, off of their zenith, the observer zenith. And then what they're trying to do is pretend that they're using a bubble sextant and things like that on board a ship. You don't use a bubble sextant on a ship, and you only use an artificial horizon when it's very calm and there's a lot of fog. That's the only time you're going to use it, because you can't use it other than that, because the boat will be moving around too much. So what they're doing is they're trying to mix in the types of sextants they're using. Like, you don't use a sextant. You don't use a sextant like you'd use on a ship in an airplane. Why? Because they're not designed the same way. One is designed for an airplane. One is designed for a ship. Like these, but there's a small portion of them that know better and they're just lying. Then there's a huge portion of them that are underneath them people who just believe any rubbish. And that's what we're dealing with. They don't know what they're talking about.
So I've put here, ensure that they always use bendy horizontals in their bendy coordinates and pounce if they claim tangent, angle, or perpendicular. I'm going to add to that a bubble level, because that is right. They will claim a bubble level gives them a tangential plane. Well, their tangential plane is curved when they use a bubble sextant, because the curvature of space-time caused by Earth's mass is bending that straight line that they're calling a tangential line. So, yeah, you can use a bubble sextant, but the minute they do, point out that they don't have a straight line for measuring an angle with a bubble sextant if Earth's mass is bending space-time, because it's a...
It's not really a win.
What?
They're saying they establish a tangential plane with a bubble. That's a levelling device. So they've established a level plane. And then they're claiming Dingleberry Earth is dangling beneath that plane that they've established with a tool used for establishing a plane, a horizontal level, a levelling tool, a bubble sextant. So they're establishing a plane and just mildly linking it to their belief in a sphere by calling it a Dingleberry tangent point dangling below the plane they're actually using, Anthony.
You're right, but when they say tangent, even if they're begging the question and like you're saying, the Earth's dangling below, that tangent line is a straight line, isn't it? But in their model, it isn't a straight line, so they're calling it a tangent line.
No, I agree.
No.
I completely agree.
I'm just pointing
they
out
haven't
for
got the straight line.
benefit.
You're saying when they claim that loose connection to a sphere dangling below the flat plane we're actually going to be using. We're going to be using Euclidean. So we can't be using spherical. But they've still got one dangling below, and you're saying, well, they say tangent. Well, they haven't got one when you reference their gravity and pseudo-Riemannian space-time bending. I say they haven't got one because the light's all bending at a standard rate of hour always. What is it, no atmo day? So
Exactly.
So, no, you haven't got that loose connection. So what have we got left, Anthony? After we debunk their tangent point, which was debunked in 2020, Black Swan, and now you're debunking it further with their own version of gravity, nonsensical pseudo-force space. Wonderful. What are we left with of the tangent
Well, we're left
plane?
with an arc line to the target, whichever star you want, you've got an arc line there. And whether you measure that against a bubble level, which gives you a horizontal that curves in their model, which is useless for measuring a line, you've got a curved line here, and you've got a curved line here, or you haven't got any way of measuring any angle, have you? You're going to have to use.
Yeah, okay, I got that all. I got all that. My question though, what have you got left? They say, no, I've got a straight line with that we're going to use and navigate on and get angles with, and a dingleberry Earth attached by a tangent. So we've got a tangent plane. If you have just done, and I have just done, and we have just done, debunk the tangent, what are they left with when they're claiming? They are claiming a tangent plane.
Diddly squat.
No. He's just missing the point the second time. I'm going to have to tell him. No. So what they've got left from their version of this when they use our flat Earth trig that you've just explained and justified the use of it with dingleberry Earth dangling by a tangent, they haven't got the tangent part of the tangent plane, but they have got the...
Plane.
Yes, finally, we got there. Yes. So the plane bit, definitely used by both sides. The tangent bit, debunked on all counts, on all sides. One with what you've got on screen now, and one with the refracted, always bent through sphere-shaped air light that definitely isn't giving them a tangent either. What's that they say? Tangent? What's the tangent point touching? Oh, yeah, the geometric horizon. That's Earth curve, by the way. What's that you say? It's refracted to a non-geometric, non-tangent-based point beyond the oil rigs. So definitely not a straight line for a tangent plane, then. So what we left with? Not the tangent bit, just the plane. And what do you know?
Correct.
When you actually do this process, that's exactly what you need to measure an angle, and it works every time. No conversions from a sphere required, just a measurement of an angle. That's all that's done.
Whether they use a bubble sextant or any type of sextant, they have to have a horizontal. So they can't bend it. It has to be a horizontal. There is no way around that. That's the way it works. That's the way it has to be.
No, but I've seen them.
Yeah, one second. Just like, I know you've seen them bullshit on. Sorry for the language, but that's what they're doing. You can't do any of that. Whether you use an artificial horizon, the real horizon, or a bubble sextant, you have to create a 90. You need a horizontal baseline. That's how it works.
Yeah, but
Now,
hang on.
one small other thing to say. As soon as they talk about anything to do with a tangent plane, they are then admitting that they can't do this process on the surface of the globe. And that's all that matters, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay,
The minute they make anything that's a straight line, ever, or claim the word angle, it's over because they're using straight lines to get the angle. So the minute you hear level or straight line or angle or perpendicular or any of the Euclidean reference points that we use for measuring angles, they're using flat earth geometry, otherwise known as Euclidean geometry, to make claims about their model. But that's the wrong geometry. But I did hear, just to address you, Brian, Professor Phil Bell, I was arguing with him because he claims that he can measure an angle from vertical, which is true, but he doesn't accept that when he measures the angle using the protractor or whatever device he wants to use, from vertical, if he measures an angle to a star, he has to adjust for refraction, which he says that you can do with the almanac, but he doesn't account for the Earth's mass warp in space-time, and that's the bit he's got to adjust for to be able to use an angle, and he has no idea how that works, but he ignores it anyway. So,
Meanwhile, celestial navigation does none of that. It takes an angle to a body and plots out the position below with a 90 degree to your position using this method. This would be celestial navigation. So while Phil might be able to argue how it might work when he begs the question of a sphere, celestial navigation actually uses a flat plane. It proves Earth's flat. Don't give a crap what Phil thinks he might be able to do when there's a well-established method called celestial navigation. You see, you might want to get into an argument with the people who are doing celestial navigation as opposed to us, eh, Phil? You think you can do it better with your nonsensical sphere with its Euclidean geometry? Oh, no, 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 no.
I'm just pointing
That's
out
not
how
fair, Nathan. It works perfectly fine, right? You have this flat plane, whatever, it seems like that at least. You can work and operate on it, and you can just imagine how the Earth is a globe underneath that flat plane.
I see. So with this diagram on screen now, if I'm positioning this, that I'm using the GP or the geometric horizon or my position as a tangent to a plane, you're saying I can draw a little sphere below this line, right? You're saying that's what's possible. If this GP happens to be a couple of thousand miles away, I just draw a sphere underneath. And then Bob's your uncle, still using a flat line. We're still going to track along the ground in terms of where it's positionally located. It's all done on a flat plane with trig that only can be done on a flat plane. But as long as I dangle a sphere beneath it, Arwin, we're all cushy.
Yes, because it
No.
might seem like a flat plane, but
No, Arwen.
in the
No.
geometry, it's still a globe. So you can. It's
No.
very easy to
In
imagine
which geometry?
in the real world how you're actually standing
just
underneath a globe that seems like a flat plane.
Bloody hell, Arwin, verbal diarrhea or what? In the geometry, you said. Which geometry? Speak to Anthony.
Non-pseudo-Riemannian.
Non-pseudo-Riemannian. That's Euclidean.
Yeah.
Well, no.
That's a nice way of putting
Wrong.
it.
Anthony, feel free.
I was responding to Akumo in chat. He just says we don't use. Oh, where did he put it? We don't use a flat plane to navigate. No, but you do use a flat plane to measure angles from, don't you? And that's where it's game over.
Yeah, you
just
do use
ignore
a.
them.
He's wrong. Hold on, he's wrong.
flat.
Hold on. Just got to deal with chat skanks now because Anthony's not paying attention to the actual discussion that's taking place. But there we go. No, it does actually take place on a flat plane. Here's the diagram. That's what's actually done. Here's
That's
another
right.
diagram of triangulation. All of these circles are flat. They wouldn't give you 90 degrees. That's a flat baseline for all of them, unless all of this area was flat. This is a vast area.
You know what that means,
thousands of miles. Why am I getting rumpus?
It means Akumo. It means Akumo that you do need a flat plane to navigate. Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just wrong. But just ignore the chat skanks. They can come in. There's an open space for them to come in. They can join the live stream queue if there isn't a space, and we'll move them in. But just Arwin saying they use non-pseudo-Riemannian four-space trig.
That's right. And
That's a double
besides,
negative, isn't it?
The plane
Yes, it
only
is.
needs
Oh,
to be
God, bloody hell.
apparently flat.
Can we try and just talk one at a time? That's right, Anthony. Yes, that's a double negative in effect, but making it revert back to Euclidean.
Yeah, that's right. So it becomes a positive, which becomes the alternative that we were using in the first place, Euclidean, absolutely. And what did you call it? A non-pseudo-Riemannian four-space geometry. I love that.
That's why he paused real quick, because he had to phrase it in a certain way.
That's not what it. That's not what it would be called. It would be called non-Euclidean.
Yeah, or non-pseudo-Riemannian.
Non-pseudo-Riemannian
It's a
is
good
better,
one.
but
It's non-Euclidean.
non-Euclidean or non-pseudo-Riemannian.
Yeah, it's like the visible horizon as opposed to the non-visible horizon.
Yeah, the visible as opposed to the non-visible. That's right, because there's two. Meanwhile, in actual reality, we only have one horizon, and the horizon in the begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking, Earth curve calculator is their tangent point with a straight line drawn to it. And what is that straight line drawn to? The tangent point, that is? That's Earth curve. It's the point that they used to claim block boats and buildings with its physical nature.
I heard somebody
they
say
had
that
known.
we have an atmosphere, therefore we can't see that.
Yeah, that was Mr. Sensible. Check out my video that says Mr. Sensible debunks the tangent, given that we're all currently being told how they can just draw out a big, flat, ever-expansive, infinite, flat plane. My bad. Tangent plane. Dingleberry Earth dangling below a vast, flat plane, because it's got to be flat, because you couldn't do this otherwise. Needs a flat plane. So...
Yeah.
Right. Really,
Curtains.
the big problem about the globe model is that they rolled out all these basic geometry-based mythologies, like, oh, look, you can have a globe in your hand, a little sphere, and then look, oh, it has a geometric horizon, even though that doesn't actually apply to the Earth in the real world. Yet they persisted to roll out that myth, and I don't really understand why, other than they just thought that nobody would get it. Like, oh yeah, warped geometry, terrestrial refraction, it makes it too complex. You can't make a little kid understand that. That must have been the motivation why they taught the geometric horizons and boats going over it in class. Because otherwise it makes no sense, because it never was that. It was always a false story. There was always terrestrial refraction. It always seems flat, and that's the only way you can use the instruments, right? Because it does seem flat.
Can I just state that in reality, we're either using, people who do celestial navigation are either using a bubble sextant or an artificial horizon to create an imaginary horizontal line that's making an absolute parallel with the elevation baseline of the Earth, or they're using the actual horizontal baseline of the Earth by using a sextant with an horizon mirror on it. I just need to throw that in there, because there's a lot of talk about all these different bullshit, sorry about the language, these stupid geometries that have no basis in reality. In reality, none of that stuff happens.
May I simplify the argument?
Yeah, feel free. I just thought while you're doing
Please.
it, just while you're doing it though,
People
John,
are
I just thought,
ignoring my rebuttal.
thank you. So while you're doing that, John, I'll just leave this diagram at the 10th posted a while back that shows how it doesn't work by their own detailed diagram with a 90-degree position to a flat baseline and then a curve drawn through it that has no relation and completely destroys the actual process with a claim that it's a great circle. The great circle that doesn't work with the actual flat baseline you require. So I thought I'll leave that on screen for everyone to peruse while you're talking. Go ahead, John.
Well, Eratosthenes was claimed to look down a well and see that there was no shadow cast and that the light went straight down the well. And then the next year, on the same day, he was 500 miles away and measured an angle with a stick and a shadow. All he used was the tip of the stick, or the height of the stick, and the end of the shadow, and he drew a straight line. He used geometry to draw a straight line to the sun, and he used the flat earth we dwell atop to get an angle. So you don't have to correct for dip. There's no talk of tangents. There's no confusion. That's just what it is.
So what you're saying, I thought about this last night, is that rather than pointing out where their argument with that sticks and shadows claim falls apart, really, as it's well documented, we should actually use the same argument that has been sort of resurrected with a bit of new life by Sleeping Warrior today in that regard. In other words, that becomes our positive assertion. His measurement using standard trig proved Earth is flat. His measurement can only be done on a flat Earth and is using angle measurements that require the Earth to be flat to measure them. Now, the fact he measured them is pretty well documented, but that's a proof for us. So, really, we should take those history books and start pointing out how, prior to his extrapolation and insanity that takes a flat Earth elevation... Oh, no, it's not. It's still an elevation angle measurement, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, I thought so.
Yes.
It
utilizing the
Go on, sorry.
ground.
Indeed. It's still an
It's
elevation angle
utilizing the
measurement.
height above.
So the documented version of events of him getting that angle prove a flat Earth.
Yeah.
I suppose the question we need to be asking these ball earthers is, how do you do triangulation in non-Euclidean geometry?
Well, that's a bit advanced, but yes, it's an extra
You
arm
don't.
to this argument. It's not the main arm. This isn't the main
Yeah, but
branch,
we
Anthony.
don't
Don't get too cocky.
Pseudo-Riemannian force space is an extract from the real physical world, right? Nobody claims you can actually do geometry in pseudo-Riemannian force space. You can only do math with it.
No, they all claim it's directly translatable to physical reality, Arwin. What are you talking about?
That's wrong.
Yeah, we know that's wrong.
That must be anti.
Let's just get clear what's happening here. Anthony is using their own version of events that they have claimed and must stick to. It's their version of events against them. Doesn't mean that suddenly we adhere to the ideas and notions that there's a pseudo force space time bending as a result of the uneven distribution of what now? Mass? What's that?
Yeah, but to be fair, that's not exactly fair because Einstein never even claimed that it was outside of math, right? That's anti-flat earthers basically digging it up and just conjuring it into physical reality. Einstein never claimed that. They did the same thing with Newton, and now Einstein is getting reified.
Who cares? It won't give him a tangent. That's Anthony's point. That's it. Let's not overegg the pudding.
Arwin, let me be really clear. I'm not reifying Einstein's geometry. I'm telling them that that's what they need to do because that's their model, that's their geometry, not ours. We use straight lines. They need to use that, and that's why I'm asking them, how do you get trigonometrical calculations performed in non-Euclidean geometry? You can't.
In other words, let's not worry about how you claim you can get a flat plane from a sphere. Let's not argue all day how it is possible to use a flat plane and flat plane trig in order to do celestial navigation. Let's just argue about how you, with your claims of your version of this mathematics with four-space geometry, how you do it. Don't use ours. How dare you? Don't tell us how you justify using ours by drawing out a dingleberry earth dangling below what is essentially a flat plane that you're actually using. That's an outrage. That's just you proving flat earth, as Brian would say. Now do it with spherical trig.
But who is actually out there claiming that you can measure a pseudo-Riemannian force space in the real world? Who is even saying that?
That's the point.
It's the model. That's their model. That's the premise, the basis of their model. God, it comes to something when we can't remember on this show people constantly barking bloody gravity as an answer to everything you put to them. God, long gone are those days since we asked for scientific evidence of it.
I have a great quote for that from Professor Phil Bell that I shared yesterday.
Arwin, just re-ask your question to me and let me answer you. Just ask your question again.
Who is claiming that they can measure pseudo-Riemannian force space in the physical real world?
And the answer to that is none of them, because you can't do it, but that is their model. So make sure that they start applying non-Euclidean geometry to their trigonometry and then work out how it doesn't work and ask them to explain why it doesn't work. And the answer is because you need 3 straight lines for triangulation. Do you know what? Do you remember when Nathan says, he always says they get the dirty secret out first so that like they say, like, where's the edge? And that's because they've got an edge to call it the geometric horizon and they don't want us to focus on it. So they bomb you with it and say, where's the edge? I remember, like, we all make mistakes. I've made mistakes over the times. One of the mistakes that I remember, when I say mistake, one of the things that I got pounced on the most was Riley can't triangle. I got such a bombardment for that. And it was like, it doesn't even matter about the arguments at the time. The point is the level of attack that I got from it. Looking back in retrospect now, it's because they don't want us looking at triangles. They don't want us to be talking about triangles. Well, guess what? They only work on a flat plane, guys. Our geometry.
Yeah, that's a good one. They went after me too. Oh, you can't triangulate. Now they oh my God, don't bring up triangles now. Because now we figured it out.
I have a couple of things I want to say. Number one, 3 things. Number 1, spherical trigonometry involves a flat plane. They have to use, to do spherical trigonometry, they have to use the equatorial plane of the globe. That's what they have to do to do spherical trigonometry.
Sorry, the equatorial. Sorry, I missed that. Equatorial what now?
Plane. The equatorial plane.
The flat Earth at the middle of a sphere Earth that none of us are standing upon. The flat plane in the middle of the rock that's not going to be used when we measure an angle to something an infinite distance away. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, so they have to use that to do spherical trigonometry. They also must use a flat plane. Basically, they must use a zenith from both the north and south poles to that same equatorial plane to do spherical coordinates, right? So that also requires 90-degree angles, and a flat plane. Moreover than that, I brought out a video, I don't know when it was, could have been sometime last year, and it was triangle-shaped debunks globe, and I got an absolute tirade of hatred over it. And they didn't even know what I was talking about, but they didn't understand because I was talking about the melted pizza triangle that that the Alberuni's would have supposedly ended up with, right, if it was a globe. But the other thing I want to say is just about John and what he's saying about the Eratosthenes thing. Do you remember me, Nathan, talking about how Eratosthenes measured one portion of a flat diameter? I don't know if you remember. I've said that a few different times, but that's what I'm talking about. I wasn't catching on to what John was saying. That the GP, right, of Eratosthenes, what Eratosthenes did, the GP is the well, right? He took an angle a year later from a different place and took, I don't know which one, from Cyan to Alexandria, or Alexandria to Cyan, I'm not sure which one. But the GP is the well. So he measured, without a doubt, a 500-mile horizontal along the surface of Earth. And I read that already. I read that a couple of years ago. And do you know where I read it? The Flat Earth Society website.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? It's just like Anthony led into this with. I'm glad you tailed off with that, because Anthony started by saying they hang out their worst argument right on the forefront and attack you with it. So do we have a capability of a sky vacuum? It violates natural law. Where's your dome? Do we have an edge with boats falling over it, claimed to be blocked by Earth's curvature? Where's your edge? And you suddenly start thinking about these things, going, why are we attacked on these bases? Why is Aristophanes thrown in our faces the moment we get here, like it's amazing, like it's the best proof ever, like this extrapolation from a flat plane proves Earth's a sphere? It's nuts.
Because they need to slip it in quickly.
Yeah,
before
if you think
catch
about Alberuni and you think about Eratosthenes and how they measured things using angles, be it wells or angles from mountains and horizons, no matter what you think about, you can directly apply this argument against both of them and say, well, if they're using Euclidean geometry, but Einstein says it's non-Euclidean that we should be using, and therefore non-Euclidean coordinate systems, then all of the measurements that these guys use to make their claim that we're living on a spherical Earth are totally redundant, because Einstein's rewritten all that and said, now you've got curves now because of Earth's mass warping space-time, giving us curvilinear coordinates. Well, guess what? That totally destroys Alberuni in itself, but we don't realize that because the clash between the two, they're incompatible. Doesn't work with us yet. We're not arguing those arguments strong enough. But now it's all beginning to knit together and create a picture. Alberuni, Eratosthenes, anybody doing any kind of measurements with angles, straight lines of any kind, right angles or anything, any form of trigonometry, all of that's out the window because Earth's mass bends space-time, and Einstein said so. And he's not our science, but he is yours, guys. So you will use him and you will admire him, and he is your God, isn't he? So let's start talking about bendy space-time, please. Thank you.
Or in other words, let's start using your own geometry, not flat Earth geometry with the Dingleberry tangent point we debunked in 2020. Furthermore, bendy space-time precludes your use of straight lines, as does sphere-shaped air oxymoron atmosphere. So you definitely don't have a tangent to justify a flat plane working on a sphere, because that's nonsensical, especially when you start describing it as infinitely expanding in all directions. It just means we've got an infinitely expanding in all directions plane by your description and your claim. I wouldn't claim such infinite vastness to the flat plane we obviously dwell atop. We have to. Celestial navigation proves it. That's why you're justifying a Dingleberry Earth dangling below a flat plane we actually use. So, to speak to Anthony's point, let's see a bit of spherical geometry being applied when you're claiming that you can use our flat Earth version on a flat plane dangling sphere isn't a justifiable argument anymore. You haven't got a tangent.
Correct. They haven't got a straight line to form a tangent plane, and they claim that they've got a tangent plane, but they don't, because curving space-time is warped by Earth's mass. So they don't have that tangential plane that they're claiming. Make sure you jump on it, because tangents are used in Euclidean geometry. It's not their model.
No, look, the whole tangent plane thing, it doesn't work. Refraction, terrestrial refraction, is not a part of pseudo-Riemannian force space. It's just a way to kind of calculate the globe again, but it's always going to seem flat. That's how, and if you use optical instruments, that's exactly what you need, right?
Yeah, but seeming flat in a sphere Earth world means you've got a bent line to whatever you're viewing. Well, that's definitely not useful for measuring angles, Arwin. You used this yesterday. I got annoyed at the time, but now it's just comical, because you're saying, well, look, it all appears flat. You used it about a week ago as well. Well, okay. But in order to say it appears flat, what do you mean appears? How is it just not flat? How is it appearing flat? That makes no sense. What do you mean? Well, because I'm saying appears, it means all lines are bent when it appears flat. All right, I see. So the line's actually bent. How's that going to give me an angle again? Oh, yeah, it won't. Will it, Arwin?
No, it
No.
won't.
So celestial navigation with this claim in standing, which is the claim of the Black Swan rebuttal, it's all refracted always in sphere-shaped air, atmosphere, oxymoron, therefore no straight lines ever. Well, how are you going to get an angle then? You can't on a sphere. End of argument for the sphere with its claim of curvy lines.
You don't need a geometric angle. You don't need an apparent angle since you're dealing with an optical instrument.
It's a tangent point.
That's why I
Arwin.
like
It's a geometric line with a math. It's a geometric line that's being utilised in their claim. They're the ones who draw it straight, Arwin, not me. I'm not Roofy drawing a straight line to a tangent point debunked in 2020. They're drawing
Yeah,
it.
they just don't understand.
They
don't know
don't
what
understand what their own model. Yeah, well, when they've drawn a straight line because they need to correct from a geometric horizon with what they call dip, which isn't dip. Height of eye correction is not their version of dip from a geometric tangent point. Meanwhile, they are correcting from a geometric tangent point debunked in 2020. Because all the lines are bent, right? That's your point. It appears flat because infinite over R refraction. Over R refraction, so bent line then, no angles.
Correct. And they're just having trouble with falling back into old habits where lines in their diagrams are straight, even though
Yeah,
they can't
bless 'em.
technically use that anymore.
Bless their little cotton socks falling into those old habits where they've got a straight line.
No, it's more sinister. They're not falling back into old habits. They're stealing our geometry and then rebranding it as flat Earth geometry when it's actually the only geometry that gives you triangulation and the ability to calculate distances or whatever, trigonometry. They're stealing that, using it as though it's their own. And then when we say, well, hang on a second, that's a problem, they just completely ignore it. That's why I'm saying make sure that they're bending every straight line and not getting any angles ever, for no matter what they say. When, oh, well, we can use a bubble level. Okay, but that's still going to give you a straight line. That doesn't work in your geometry, guys, because every straight line is a curve. So bubble levels are useless to you in your geometry, according to Einstein. Thanks, Einstein.
Yeah, and Arwin, the 7/6R is directly connected to Einstein. 7/6R. He required R to make the claims he made.
Yeah, whatever. That's not what this
He
argument is
knows
about.
that, Brian. But
I would like to point out.
I'd like to point out that I'm appreciative of Brian's correction.
I can spend a lot of time trying
Jesus,
to
when there's
justify
two
R.
people already talking, Arwin wants to pile in. Yeah, I appreciate your correct. Let's try that for a third time. Yes, I appreciate you correcting Arwin at the end there, Brian, despite me pointing out that Arwin absolutely knows that with his moans and groans. It needs correcting anyway. Arwin's just playing devil's advocate and snapping in and out of character. Go ahead, John. Not Arwin, not Brian. John.
Go, John.
I would like to point out Eratosthenes did not use an optical instrument. So it's just pure geometry, 500 miles of flat.
I totally agree. We should just absorb that. That's a flat earth proof. Now, the moment they start saying, oh, here, look, he extrapolates the maths, oh, that's nice. So he takes his flat earth angles and makes a sphere out of them, does he? Oh, well, that's nice. Yeah, he definitely measured these angles, though, didn't he, with a flat baseline? It's an elevation angle measurement.
It's not fair. At that time, they hadn't perfected glass lensing and all that. They hadn't the opportunity to really discover that there is a thing called terrestrial refraction, that light actually bends. They didn't know that back then, so they just had to go by what they knew. And in their diagrams, they thought that lines were going to be straight. Right?
There isn't such a thing as terrestrial refraction. That doesn't exist. There isn't such a thing as terrestrial refraction. That doesn't exist. That's mathematical, based on an R value. It doesn't. R value that was never measured and doesn't exist. That it was calculated off a flat plane, all right. Anyway, yeah, the Eratosthenes, and not only is that brilliant and probably the greatest flat earth proof ever, but it happened 2,000 years ago. So 2,000 years ago, Eratosthenes was proven the earth was flat. Get your own geometry, ballers.
Yeah, I love it, Brian. Right on, sister. Woo-hoo-hoo. Yeah, get your own damn geometry. We've been proving it's flat with a flat Earth baseline, a flat Earth elevation angle measurement for 2,000 years. What's that you say you've been taking our flat Earth proof and turning it spherical for 2,000 years? Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, you needed a flat plane for it, though, didn't you?
Yeah. That's the point. They
tell us we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Proves our point, morons.
Yeah. I still hold firm to terrestrial refraction.
Oh,
They
by the
just
way,
didn't know.
terrestrial.
So you can't get an angle then. So holding strong to that bent line that won't ever give you a straight line for an angle measurement. Yeah, you do that, Arwin.
Hey,
Yeah,
Nathan.
it's never going to work out in a diagram, but it will work out when you're doing optical measurements.
Hey Nathan, I think you've watched Bev Trithinking's interview with Mr. Sensible. Have you watched that recently?
Yeah, trimmed out a part of it.
I thought you'd watched it because I watched that just yesterday or this morning, whichever. And in that conversation that Bev had with him, Sensible or Mr. Sensitive made reference to Skunk Bay. And the way he talked about it, it was as if he'd never seen it before. Now, what he was talking about in that Skunk Bay horizon footage is how it was stretching and shrinking. It was moving up and down. And he's obviously referring that to greater, like more curves and less curves, all to do with 7/6R, right? But what he ignores is that we've known about Skunk Bay for years. And what we say is that, well, if you're going to be measuring straight lines to those things on the horizon to calculate angles and they're wandering all over the place, yeah, what we call refraction is basically the movement of the horizon, like in real world. When you're looking at the horizon over time, it wobbles, wanders around, and does all these weird things. But because they put curved lines to it, because 7/6R, that rules out and negates the Euclidean geometry that they suddenly start applying. But it was just brilliant to listen to how he didn't seem to even know about it. It was like new topic and new information to him. And I was like, you've not seen that before, have you? But we've been talking about Skunk Bay for years.
Essentially what he's saying is the physical geometric limitation leading edge of a sphere, formerly known as Earth curve, that blocks boats and buildings. Check it out, it moves all over the place in this imagery. It's like, my God, I almost used that. I did trim that out as well from Bev's stream. I had it, but when I was concisely summarising the point I was making while the anti-flat earther known as Akumo virus was denying that he hasn't got any straight lines to a tangent point, Mr. Sensible's reiterating that you have never got any straight lines. You haven't got a geometric horizon. You know, I've used that bit. But yeah, the bit that followed that was immediately afterwards was him talking about Skunk Bay. And like you say, my eyebrow did rise.
Yeah. It's
Skunk
devastating.
Bay.
Because,
Wow.
yeah,
I haven't heard that in
devastating.
freaking years, man.
But it seemed like he'd only just got familiar with it. And obviously he's looking at that and he's seeing straight lines to the horizon and changing the angle, but he's not seeing the curved line in their geometry getting more curved and less curved. Well, that is what he's supposed to be seeing, but he's seeing straight lines being adjusted.
He sees straight lines. The same guy would just say we have an atmosphere. Therefore, it's always refraction.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how 7/6R, they completely forget about it when they start measuring angles. All the lines are straight.
Exactly. Exactly.
Sorry, Nathan.
Straight line of sight, said anti-flat earther Akumu virus. What do you mean straight line of sight to get a tangent? No. What's that, Mr. Sensible, ringing in your ears a little bit there, Akumu virus? No geometric tangent point to measure a straight line with. All lines always bend, always. Mr. Sensible seems to constantly put his foot right into a bear trap right at the right moment, doesn't he?
You only
it's
have
worse
to
than that.
curve the lines in geometry to correct for optics.
It's worse than that. He's further proving that the horizon is definitely not geometric by showing Skunk Bay.
Exactly. That's Anthony and our point. Exactly. He's showing that he's basically saying, check out how non-geometric, non-earth curved, non-going to be blocking things horizon this is in Skunk Bay. You're like, yeah, mate, yeah. We've been pointing that out for quite some time.
And the best thing about Skunk Bay, and I'm going to refer to the 24-hour time lapse that was taken of Chicago skyline across Lake Michigan, the same thing happens in both of them. The highest points, let's say the tops of the buildings across Chicago or the tops of the mountains in the background on the Skunk Bay footage, everything below them points changes. It goes up, it comes down, it stretches, it expands, it compresses, but the tops don't move because they are constants. They're always there because they're not being loomed up from behind some geometric globe horizon. They're always there. It's the refraction that's happening below them, whether it be the buildings or the mountains. That's all happening. That's all wavy nonsense to do with temperature and different things, but has nothing to do with the globe. There is the tops of the buildings and the tops of the mountains sitting exactly where they are all the time. You can time lapse it for 2 years straight, and yet they won't be going up and down. They won't be like a yo-yo.
Yeah, right on. It's like happy old days, old times, listening to people mention Skunk Bay. Especially, obviously, with Mr. Sensible. He's not particularly old in this argument, is he? He's not old hat. He's relatively new. So, clearly, he wasn't around 5 years ago when we were debating about it and posting it in videos and stuff. So he's got no clue. And to be fair to Bev, neither's Bev to mention that to him. Bev's not been around that much time, has he? Unless I'm mistaken.
No, I got the feeling Bev didn't know the reference that he was referencing at the time, if I'm honest.
It's because it's pre-2018, if that's correct, Brian. I'd just do a quick shout-out to Goldie McKinnon, who says, did everyone share the show on their... Oh, I'm going to have to change the resolution on this screen. It's just so small. Let's move my mic closer. Sock meds this morning. What's that mean? Did everyone share the show on their sock meds this morning? ? Big love from South Florida. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat, Goldie. Really appreciate the support. Don't really understand the super chat, but thank you anyway. 161 watching. Very warm welcome to all of you who've just joined us. If you have just joined us, please share the show. Yeah, he didn't know the reference, neither did Bev. I agree. I'm sure Bev does know what Skunk Bay is. That's not our point, by the way, in case someone was like, of course Bev knows about Skunk Bay. No, he just doesn't know how the framework of how it was being argued about back in 2015 and 2016. That's all we're saying.
No, I got the feeling he didn't know about it at all. It seemed because he didn't even acknowledge it, and I'd have been all over that. I'd have been like, "Oh, really? Those straight lines that you're applying to the horizon there, right? Oh, dip angle. Yeah, but are they straight line dip angles? Yeah, they're straight. Yeah, that's Euclidean geometry. You need to show us a bendy sextant to measure that. Show us that bendy sextant."
Yeah, I think we need some challenges now for the bowlers. We need to, you know, the way they have this MC Tune challenge, this mathematical challenge he has, and all these other nonsense challenges they come up with. You know, they're all begging the question globe challenges. Let's come up with a real world challenge for them. You know,
what do you mean? We have a challenge.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
Angle.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Go ahead. Let's try that again, Brian.
Okay, thank you. Let's challenge them to do one of these processes without a tangent plane. You know, let's try surveying without a tangent plane. Let's try celestial navigation without a tangent plane. Just curved surface.
You said it better earlier, actually. I might trim that out. Get your own geometry.
Yeah.
It's RB.
Who was that in Discord? Go on, whoever that was. Had my eye on something else. Sod's law. Did someone want to add something?
I think he said, where'd you get your tangent?
Indeed. Where'd you get that tangent again? They haven't got one. It's been debunked for 2 straight years. And if they go, what do you mean it's been debunked? Ugh, really? So soon? Refraction? No? Forgotten? Amnesia? Really? Okay. Amazing.
Terrestrial refraction makes it impossible to
Maybe you should play Mr. Sensible, telling them that, you know, everything is always refracted because we live in an atmosphere.
Don't let that kill the conversation 2 minutes before the end of the live show.
Well, the debate's over.
refraction.
Hang on. We got 3 more housekeeping questions we could rattle through, Nathan.
Terrestrial refraction makes it impossible to get a tangent of the
In a minute and a half, I think not.
Oh, okay then. Well, in that case, the show's just died, folks. Thanks for coming. Goodbye.
No. Don't let that kill the show.
And
on that note,
No.
Any evidence of the distance to the sun, Anthony?
How are you going to triangulate the distance to the sun? Definitely going to be using straight lines for that, aren't you? Get your own geometry.
Now just put yourself in the middle of a rock. That'll work.
So
The hell with challenging them.
the answer to every housekeeping question can now be get your own geometry.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, they've got their own geometry. They just refuse to use it. So the answer shouldn't be get your own geometry. It should be
It should.
your own geometry.
No, it should. It should be get your own geometry, because what are they actually using? That strengthens our argument. So what are you actually applying again? You're using the flat earth version, right? You get your own geometry. What's that? You've already got one? Well, after the fact, you can say, well, go ahead and apply it. What's that you need to apply as? Because it's flat. Yeah, we know. Right, I have actually dug out that clip. So this is
To be fair,
just before we do end,
Can I
and
say
ask
something?
everyone to stay tuned, and Arwen just continues regardless of what I'm hinting at. Here's the video that I've just released. So it's called Mr. Sensible Debunks the Globe Tangent. There is also a link below or in pinned comments for Bev Try Thinking. That's the origin of this particular clip. I only took a few seconds of Bev's video, but that's the Mr. Sensible part, which is the main bread and butter of it. So here we go.
We live in an atmosphere, therefore you always have refraction. Because we know that you only see the apparent horizon, not the geometric horizon, because we live in an atmosphere, therefore you always have refraction. That moves the horizon.
Not get hung up on the intro of how you do this with straight lines, measuring angles, because suddenly yours are bent and refracted in standard terrestrial refraction. Suddenly we want to be getting hung up on the fact you can't get this straight line angle. No, it's the thing that proves Earth's flat. It's the point you lose. Not getting hung up on it, proving you lose and Earth's flat.
No, you're stuck on one point, and you.
What, that you can't get an elevation angle measurement from a curved Earth? Yeah, we're stuck on that point because it proves Earth's flat. It's the only point we need. You can't get one. You claimed a tangent. And yet, Black Swan, it's all refracted.
Not the geometric horizon, because we live in an atmosphere, therefore you always have refraction. And so that moves the horizon.
All your lines are bent. You can't get two straight lines. So what basic geometry am I denying when you can't measure two straight lines, meeting? One of them's bent.
So you say.
Yeah, so what if that point's not there and we can't measure the tangent?
Because we live in an atmosphere, therefore you always have refraction.
Well, you haven't got a straight line then, have you, you stupid shit?
I do. And
No, you don't. All lines are always bent. So where'd you get the straight line then?
line of sight.
Not the geometric horizon.
Well, the line of sight isn't the geometric tangent point horizon. It's not straight on your globe.
Live in an atmosphere, therefore you always have refraction.
It's not no Atmo day.
Stop bringing us in circles. It's getting annoying.
Sorry, when I point out how he loses, he says, stop bringing us in circles. No, you've said the line of sight is straight, and I've said, no, it's not no Atmo day. You're going to respond to that?
Light is bent.
So light's not going to give you a straight line for an angle measurement then? You're looking in a sextant, measuring a straight line with what you see. That's light that you see with an eyeball. But according to you and your last statement, that's bent. Yeah, we know, a standard rate on a sphere. Well, an angle's two straight lines.
The direction you're looking in is not bent.
Oh, really? So it's no Atmo day?
Live in an atmosphere, therefore you always have refraction.
What direction do you look at so that you
Right,
don't
sorry,
have
nothing to do
refraction?
with it. My response that it's no Atmo day to get a straight line's got nothing to do with it. Because it defeats your argument, it's got nothing to do with it. No, mate, it's got everything to do with the annihilation of your claim that you've got a straight line, it's the line of sight. When the line of sight, straight line tangent point, doesn't exist, we can show that in the Black Swan. You haven't got a straight line of sight.
Shows a horizon that's way beyond. Therefore, it's not a globe.
And with that, I'm going to say another huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ Pals for making today's live show possible. If you are watching this on either Nathan, excuse me, on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. If you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. A huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, hit the PayPal link, and all that good stuff. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on a premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video. Shout out to Goldie McKiernan, who says right at the end of the live show, sock meds equal social media. Thank you very much indeed for hitting the super chat. Stay tuned if you're watching on a premiering stream.